Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek-A-Day, and if you are a follower of my main channel that I've been doing for years, you know my wife Amanda and I frequently talk about video games on that channel, and I like to talk about games that I've been playing recently, and I have one that's appropriate for this channel now. We have Star Trek Prodigy Supernova, a game that Amanda picked up a little bit ago, a few weeks ago. She hasn't played it yet because she's busy playing her Arcade Paradise, but I'm in between games right now, so I gave it a shot as we've been catching up and watching the show, and I spoke a little bit about that in a previous video talking about my first experience and thoughts about the show, and I'll talk more about it in the future as it moves along. But yeah, I had to go on and do a video talking a little bit about this because I do so much video game stuff anyway all the time, and this was a game that I would not recommend. In a certain situation, maybe, if you can find it cheap. We got it for like 20 bucks, I think my wife paid. If you can get it like 20 bucks or less in a certain scenario, go for it. But outside of that, man, I would not suggest getting this at all. So Star Trek Prodigy Supernova, what is it? Star Trek Prodigy, as you know, is the collaboration with Nickelodeon to create a kid-appropriate Star Trek series for a brand new generation of Star Trek fans. And again, I think it's doing a great job. It is the perfect kind of thing where an older Star Trek fan can sit and watch with their kid, and it's a great introduction to the franchise, what Star Trek is, and again, an adult can enjoy watching it right along. It really is doing a fantastic job, and I think this is the show that is going to, more than a lot of the other stuff out there, create a new generation of Star Trek fans. And it's the kind of thing where Grandma and Grandpa can sit with the grandkids. Grandma and Grandpa who grew up with TOS can sit with the parents who grew up with TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and sit with the grandkids who then are growing up with Prodigy, and it works and everyone's going to enjoy it. So the perfect opportunity for a video game. Video games, it's a huge thing, and especially getting into younger generations, this is a great way for a family fun, appropriate, kids show to expand. Release toys, release merchandising and video games, and they even did a good job with the style of gameplay that it is. It is a somewhat simplistic action, puzzly platformer, very much the type of genre that the widest audience would be familiar with. It fits the tone of what the show is going for, and it's also both single player or two player, so it's the perfect kind of thing where two siblings who are fans of the show can sit and play together, or a parent and a child can sit and play together and help the kid out with the puzzles and things and just have fun. It's the perfect opportunity, but they dropped the ball big time. This is I won't say terrible game. I won't go that far. It's just not a good game at all. It is a very rushed, cheap, lazy cash-in of a game. That is what Supernova is, to capitalize on something. And those have always existed. Growing up, I feel like there used to be so many more even back in the day. Whenever a movie would come out, there'd be a tie-in game. And they were always on the cheaper side. They were always very rushed. They were never... I wouldn't say never, very infrequently were they any good. And this fits into that category. It really feels like a missed opportunity, though, because if this was a quality game, it would really fit into that perfect scenario set up, but it fails in every remark. So we'll start with the most basics, visuals and sound, get into the gameplay, and then the other stuff that they really dropped the ball with. There are a few things even involving the toys that it's like, what did you do? Visually, starts off with one of the... Man and I both just kind of looked at each other. Was one of the worst comic book style animated opening sequences, and it's bookended at the ending with that as well. You don't see it throughout otherwise. And it leaves a very bad first impression. It looks very cheap and very rushed and very poor. And it should have just stuck with, even if you couldn't do a nice CG animated sequence like making it look like the show, then just stick with the basic character models and stuff that you have from the game for those, because it just looks awful. And then you move into the environments, and you are, at the time, Dal and Gwyn are the two playable characters that the entire game is structured around using those two to solve puzzles and the rest of the cast you rescue through different levels as it goes on, and they, as you rescue them, provide new abilities for those two main characters to use. All the environments throughout this entire thing as well, though, feel very bland, very cookie cutter, very just slapped together and uninteresting, and not a lot of variety. And it would be okay if, visually it just wasn't quite up to where it should be. That can also be a budgetary issue, but this, it felt more like artistically it wasn't where it could be. Even within the budgetary constraints, visually it could have been more appealing and not quite as bland. And it stands out because there's nothing distracting you from it, as we'll get into with the gameplay. And the audio as well, the music feels... The music in the show is pretty good, and there's a couple tracks that are used from the show in here, but overall, most of the music in the game is very generic, bland atmosphere, and done very, very poorly. The only upside to the sound, the only thing that's good, is it does feature the voice cast from the show, including Kate Mulgrew. So that is the one thing that is great. And it is, there's nothing terrible about the sound, it's just completely forgettable. Virtually just non-existent in some cases, and it's just bland. And the blandness moves then into the gameplay. The gameplay revolves around a lot of combat elements. As you gain new abilities, those expand as well, and solving puzzles, which are all the generic move this block from point A to point B, try to open this door, then close that door to get that door, open this with this card key. Those very traditional, very unimaginative elements that you can take those and keep it simple for a family-friendly type game, but then you can still make it interesting. You can make it simple as far as the thought process of completing the puzzles. You can make that age appropriate with it still being an interesting way of accomplishing those things, but it is just bland and unimaginative the whole way through. The same thing over and over again. The combat, it starts off where it's like, okay, it's not that great, but you think as you're getting new abilities, maybe it'll evolve and get better and improve, and it's just in the beginning very simplified. Combat ended up being, every time I entered combat, I just kind of sighed a little bit because it was the same boring thing over and over and over and over and over again. And it actually, instead of being something interesting and exciting that you wait to approach, it became something that just kind of slowed you down. You just kind of get past it and move on with the story and the puzzles and keep going, because the combat is absurdly repetitive and dull. And the puzzles are the same way. There is a little bit of variety, I think more in the puzzles than in any other element of the game. There's a little more thought, but at the same time it really is the same 4 or 5 different types of puzzles just over and over and over again in a loop as you go through the level. So it builds the first few levels to be okay, and then it just becomes a slog toward the end. It really was not, it wasn't fun. That was the biggest thing about this, was that it became so repetitive and dull that none of the gameplay elements were really fun. Story-wise, it's actually one of the more decent elements of the game, because it does fit within the first seasons of the show. After that midpoint, that episode, 10 or 11 or so, in there, story-wise, it fits right in there. It feels like it could have been a standalone episode. Again, they had the original voice cast, so from that element, it's okay, and I think fans of the show, particularly younger fans of the show, will enjoy it. But overall, it's just, I can't recommend anything else about the game. I think even as a couple of kids sitting and playing, or a parent and child, it's going to get repetitive. A child might lose interest even, and it was not well put together. And just because you're making a game that is for kids, the same way with making a movie or a book for kids, there's a tendency sometimes to underthink it and just kind of phone it in because it's meant for a younger audience. And those are the things that never work well. Like, just because it's for a younger audience doesn't mean it can be phoned in and dumbed down and lazy, and that's everything about this game. It's the design of a lot of it is really pathetic. And the other thing is that they really messed up too was the timing, and elements, especially in today's world, outside of control sometimes with production and shipping. But within this game, there's even on the inside, I'm going to put it out here, an advertisement for the first wave of Playmates toys, just wave 1. And this game came out a while ago, and I played it a few weeks ago. And within the game, there are unlockables and collectibles that you can get. Some things from Star Trek Legacy, and some things from specifically within Prodigy. But there's a whole series of extra things within the game that to obtain, you have to input codes from the action figures, from the toys. The problem is, when this released, the toys had not been released yet. They were delayed. They're coming out pretty much now, actually. At the time I'm filming this video, our selection of these toys is being shipped and should be here this week. But this game did not come out this week, so you have a whole bunch of kids who would probably be a little disappointed in playing this game and realizing, oh wow, I can unlock this stuff with the toys. Oh wait, the toys don't exist yet. So timing was off as well. A lot of things just dropped the ball in here. It's a disappointing because this was an opportunity to be more than a cheap cash-in and be something that could expand the brand and expand the excitement and something that could be built off of, even if the first game was just kind of okay. If it was received well and did well financially, you could get more and they could expand, and that could broaden into more adult type Star Trek video games related to some of the newer series. But yeah, overall, just mediocre game. Very, very mediocre. And again, I could say the only way I'd recommend it is if you find it for really cheap, like $10, $15. Like, I wouldn't pay $20. I'm not even sure if I'm okay with the $20 we spent for it. But if you find it for like $10, $15, and you are in the scenario where you have multiple, 2 siblings at least, or cousins or friends or whatever, at least 2 kids who like Prodigy a whole lot, maybe they'll get some minimal enjoyment for that price, or if you're a parent and kid and want to check it out. But outside of that window, I would not pay much more for that. I would not, as an adult who played through a single player, it was really just not enjoyable. The constant switching between the 2 characters, the puzzles, just everything became more of a slightly boring, repetitive annoyance by the end, and I was just kind of finishing it to finish it. And I don't want that experience. I want to enjoy and be excited about coming back and not finish it just for the sake of finishing it. So Star Trek Prodigy Supernova, given to my old style of reviews on video games in the past, overall, because of the voice cast and those couple little elements that I think might be attractive to kids, at least for the first couple hours before they get bored, roughly 4 out of 10.